We lost Bobby. It probably said,
As soon as you hit record, he jumped off. He got nervous.
Well, I think Chris's question was so good that I logged myself off because it was just, I was blown away.
well, then let's focus on what we're seeing in terms of trends from candidate experience. What are we seeing on the employer side for candidates who are applying to specific open positions? And then how does that translate over once, you've got employees who join the organization? Where are their expectations from a growth and development and advancement standpoint? I think if that's the topic we're looking at, Bobby, why don't you start us off and let us know, what are you seeing from a talent acquisition standpoint, just based on your own experience?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think, surprising to some, I think it's still a candidate's market right now. So I think, what we're still seeing is, an increase in the number of job openings, currently right now. So candidates kind of have their choice as to, what organizations, what jobs that they want to apply for. And I think what you're seeing in, for many companies and, particularly maybe local companies, is a little bit of a decrease in organic applicant flow. And, what that means is that individuals are potentially going through the interview process, the hiring process with multiple companies. And what that means from a candidate experience standpoint, in my own opinion, is that, companies the companies that are going to stick out are the companies that move fast, but the companies that are in frequent communication with candidates, constantly touching base with the candidate to, one, understand where they're at in their interview process with other organizations and keeping a pulse check on that. And two, just having those candid, open conversations with candidates and understanding kind of, what are those things that are important to you? Is it health benefits? Is it retirement savings, future planning? Is it, compensation? And that can change, for, by generation, by group. So, I think right now we're still seeing a candidates market, which I think is a little bit surprising to some, especially when you start hearing a lot of this recessionary talk.
Yeah,
I agree with a lot of that, and what I see, Chris, is kind of like a lot of our consumer behaviors, right, on our personal side, is kind of leaking over into our professional expectations of our employer. Almost exactly to what Bobby said, is less organic traffic, because I, as an individual, know I'm special now because I'm in the driver's seat. So when I'm proactively reached out to,
literally, you're in the driver's seat, Kevin.
Correct. Yeah, I literally am right now, but that literally makes me feel special,
Yeah.
And some of the best messages are really just talking to the person as a person. And I think people are really wanting and longing for that human connection. I mean, going back to that study that just came out about social isolation, was pretty remarkable. It's like smoking 16 cigarettes a day. So really changing Bobby's point as to what does that person prioritize, and just asking the right questions is kind of that mind shift for talent acquisition professionals, and even the hiring managers, and eventually the managers themselves. They don't know really what questions they should be asking than the traditional questions that they've always asked.
Yeah.
And it kind of limits their ability to individualize not only the experience, but also the communications too. And we can get into a million different things on the individual side, but we're seeing how Netflix and all this stuff, I give over my data for that personalized experience, and I'm fine with it. That is kind of what this generation makeup is as we get more and more comfortable with technology. So it is that analog and digital generational differences. And I think that's really what people are looking for, because that's more rewarding when I feel special, right? And then when they get into the organization, they just want to be listened to, valued, and heard. But I wanted to kind of go back to something Chris, you were talking about before we jumped on, because what I asked you is, once we've gotten them in the door, right? And onboarding is obviously one of those low-hanging fruits in a lot of organizations, but what are you seeing from a development standpoint, right? So I'm sitting down in a lot of focus groups, and a lot of people say, and we can read survey after survey, where it's all, I want lack of professional development opportunities.
Yeah.
And I thought what you said was fascinating, is where development and advancement are almost being used synonymously with one another, and it's kind of adding confusion to that generation, newer generation, into the workforce.
Yeah, and I think that's, to be quite honest, I don't think it's anything new, Kevin. I think it's been going on for a while. You know, companies do listening sessions. As you said, they survey their people. They do annual engagement surveys. I'm willing to bet if you're in an organization that's doing an annual engagement survey, in your top 5 areas of potential opportunities for improvement is you're going to see career development. And on its surface, what does that mean? We don't know. So we dig deeper, we listen, we do focus groups. And what we find is all of the individual groups or people who said, yeah, I think career development is great at this company. We look back and those are all the individuals who got promoted within the last, 6, 9, 12 months. All the people who say career development stinks at the company, those are all the people who maybe have been in their current roles for 2, 3, maybe going on 4 years. So I think there's definitely, as you said, we're using the terms advancement and development synonymously when we need to look at them a little bit differently, right? So for development, how do we look at development in terms of the continual acquisition, refining, enhancing, your knowledge, skills, and abilities, whether that's, in your current role, because you've got opportunities there, or to prepare you for a future role, right? And that's kind of the language that we use. You should constantly be looking at how do you continually develop yourself just to prepare yourself for what that next role is. Another thing I find is, and I'm not saying this is just younger generation, I've seen this throughout all generational levels, but we get fixated on a title, right? I gotta be a director, I gotta be a manager, I gotta be a VP. And we get fixated on salary, right? I got to make 100,000. I got to make 200,000. I got to make whatever it might be. And that's only going to eventually derail us, right? Because there's only so many open manager roles, director roles, VP roles in an organization. We're not going to have 1,000 VP roles in our organization. We're going to have the number that we have. So I think people get so fixated on that, and they forget that, start thinking about the actual responsibilities, the actual skills that you need to demonstrate at that particular level, and start working your way towards that, right?
So is this, but Chris, is because this is what we talk about as a group and as an organization, right? As a team, we talk about, is this really the case, right? If that is everybody's expectation, is this really the next only logical, I guess, evolution of business, is that skills-based modeling when we know there's more positions than people and the demand is not going away. So we have a shrinking labor force, but a growing demand at the same time, taking into AI, which is going to create even more jobs, but certainly displace others. I think it's only really logical to start to think about building organizations around skills.
Sure.
And almost creating those universities of skills within the organization where you are continuously learning and challenging and mentoring and all of those things that should be happening, but you're gaining new skills kind of to outrun what could be potentially automated someday. So that I think what you're talking about is really why we feel so passionately about it. And Bobby, you're probably even seeing it more on the talent acquisition side now, is like skills is really what is valuable at the end of the day, not certifications, not any of that. Yes, they help, but skills at the end of the day is what gets work done at a different quality and a different level.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because I think, we see this, and I'd be interested, Chris, in, kind of the employee life cycle if something changes, right? Because we talked about comp versus purpose a little bit there, right? So I think when folks are bringing in, when organizations are bringing in individuals, what I think a lot of people are seeing and what I'm reading is that folks are coming in because they see a purpose at that organization. They see a purpose within that position. They feel that their skills and their talents meet, what's required in that role. But at some point throughout the employee life cycle, it sounds like that flips a little bit. And then it becomes like, hey, I need that next big desk. I need that next chair. I need that next, promotion. Kevin, Chris, I'd be interested in hearing your perspective. Like what in your opinion kind of flips the switch there?
Geez, I mean, sorry for the camera. I think it's that common case of intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, right?
Yeah.
So I really think that extrinsic motivation, when intrinsic is lacking, I need extrinsic motivation in order to want to stay, right? So that's what I honestly feel, Bobby. I see the abilities to continuously strike that intrinsic motivation with challenge goals, stretch goals, pairing up different business departments to solve different business problems. That is really inherently what they want, as well as we know the ESG side, right? I've been talking about that forever. Our consumers are more a part of company cultures than companies like to admit, that I always say. Mark Cuban just said he had a revolution the other day, that his crew, his teammates, should model those that he's looking to sell and accommodate based off the community. So it's like, why is that? Why was that the first time that a billionaire had to say that now everybody's starting to recognize, like, oh yeah, that does make sense. Because I mean, PR and employee value propositions and employer brand is a consumer behavior that we have on our personal side. We read reviews from total strangers about a product and say, oh yeah, that sounds good. I'll take their recommendation. I'm going to buy that product. Would we do that in our personal lives and on the street, taking advice from somebody I don't think so, right? So we've changed, we've evolved. We're online shoppers, we're online buyers, and we're online investigators. We will find out more about the culture of an organization than the organization will ever know. So I think it is continuously challenging people and including them within the decisions to create that intrinsic motivation where you feel like you are working towards a shared goal while achieving your personal success as well as your professional. And I think that helping people find that balance and arming them with life skills is really different to think about for a lot of businesses. Moving away from extrinsic motivation only as a way to get the certain behaviors that they believe lead to certain outcomes.
So there's two things there, Kevin, that I really liked about Mark Cuban's revelation, and also, talking back to what Bobby was asking about the switch. I think you're absolutely hit the nail on the head, Kevin. People join organizations because of the mission, because of the purpose, because they can connect to it. What happens over time is if they don't get that, that personal growth, that continual growth, that's how humans are wired. We all want to continue to learn and grow and develop. And if they're not getting that from their organization, they're going to start looking elsewhere, right?
Yeah.
You look at levels of engagement, the first year is pretty high. Then years, 2 through 4, it kind of levels off. And then if you actually make it with an organization past 4 or 5 years, it goes back up again. But what I'm thinking here is organizations have to equip their managers, their leaders, to be able to be good growth developers, talent developers. And if they're not connecting with their team members to help them continue to learn, grow, and develop, they're going to look elsewhere. And I see this happen all the time, where we lose top talent and we find that, we go in and do an exit interview, find out why. Well, I never had one conversation about my career development or, learning more skills with my manager the entire time I was there. And that's a freaking shame, to be quite honest with you. You're missing out on these opportunities. So one of the things that we're seeing is, how are you building in specific dialogue and conversations around your team members' development, career development, skill development, outside of normal just feedback or one-on-ones or formal performance reviews. And if you can do that, now you're hitting those spots that we all have as human beings. We're all looking to continuously grow. And I think that's a small thing that I think companies can do to ensure that they have another touch point. We talked about the 8 touch points you have throughout the course of the year. Have another touch point where at least you're engaging with your team members in a meaningful way.
And
one other quick point, Bobby, I would also, what Chris said is exactly right. They join for the mission, the vision, the values. Once the employer has passed that test, right? That eye test.
Yeah.
Employers, when you start to talk to employees internally through like what our process is, is they will tell you that the company is so poor at reconnecting them to that mission that they joined the organization to. So you see the breakdown in communication from the impact and actually feeding that insight back to the employees on an individual level to show what impact that they're actually having. And that's, I would say, that the idea that suits are talking to us over our head and we don't understand is kind of the current perception. So in those environments, when they see what is rewarded and what is recognized, it is that advancement only is how you gain that power to then maybe potentially see the impact that you're having. But it's, I think Chris has hit it on the head. I think they do come for that, but very quickly they will realize, in 90 days, I would say, is usually when they really realize they made a mistake, but maybe you get them for a full calendar year.
So that gets us back to the TA question, right?
Yeah.
And our organizations and companies just blowing smoke during the interview candidacy process about here's our mission, here's what we value. And then when a team member actually gets, inside the walls and they find that, wait, it's not like that at all. What's going on here? So how do we help organizations kind of tell a real truer story, Bobby, when it comes to what we're about?
Potentially, right? I mean, who knows, right? I think organizations of all sizes, and locations, they operate a little differently. I mean, I think the one thing you can do is to just be true to yourself, right? And that's, creating diverse interview panels, making sure that the process isn't too long, making sure that you're asking meaningful questions that kind of directly relate back to the company culture and understanding how candidates respond to those questions. Really understanding the candidate, right? I say this all the time, right? It's a two-way street. And I think sometimes organizations feel like I have to find the best candidate for my role. That's absolutely true. But the other side of it is those candidates have to make sure that you are the right fit for them as well for the long term. So, making sure that you're asking questions and you're allowing the candidate to ask questions and to share about, their wants, desires, and needs. It's like a dating app, Chris, right? Like we have to find that perfect match. So, that's kind of where my head's at, from a TA standpoint. I wanted to come back to you because I think you made a great point, Chris, about, organizations and continual growth and learning and check-ins for managers. And, Kevin, you mentioned earlier, some organizations probably of the larger size are implementing things like, learning universities and things of that nature.
Yeah.
For, local organizations or smaller organizations that might not have the resources to build out formal training and development programs, like what are some things that their managers, their teammates, employees can do to ensure that they're, making sure people feel valued and growing, especially when they hit that 2 to 4 year mark with the organization?
Recognition, I think, is one of the easiest things in a manager's tool belt, Bobby. It's cheap. Typically, it's free. It just takes time and the investment in emotional intelligence to know when and how behaviors that you do want to recognize. And then they could potentially evolve into rewards, but recognition has such power. And it's really, again, like we've all talked about, and individualizing that experience to know what makes that person tick. Same idea. We all have different ways that our love language of how we like to be recognized for our hard work, for going the extra mile, for doing the right thing for the customer, but very rarely can we sell that again back to the employee. Again, striking more of that intrinsic motivation. And there's research and studies out there that tell you, if I had a really crappy day the day before and I get recognized 2 days later, I will completely forget about that negative event. So in this cyclical moment where we are moody, right? We're stressed, we're anxious. If we are able to soften the emotions because we know it's a high emotional time, gratitude and recognition, those are tools in a company's tool belt that just takes time and investment. And I would love to see, to Chris's point, the evolution of the extrinsic motivation to start to get managers to prioritize that. Because now it's just operational savings and profitability. That's what they're always going to prioritize because that is what we're telling them is most important in the role. and what we as a company value their position of doing. Until you change that, you're not really going to change a lot of the behaviors. But I think recognition, Bobby, is some pretty easy low-hanging fruit that has a high impact.
Sure.
I'd add on to that as well too. Yeah, absolutely important, Kevin. I think this equally important is, really good managers know what the unique skills are of their team members, right? And they can do a couple of things. They can continue to leverage those strengths that those individuals have, right? And then they can match that up with potential opportunities, again, that already work that needs to get done. So they don't have a big budget. There's no learning university. A good manager knows what the skill set, the strengths, the aspirations are of their team members, and they connect the work with that. So in addition to recognition, I was going to say delegation. So really good managers use delegation as a development opportunity, right? And I can,
end of the day.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that, we could do a whole nother call on, delegating for development and motivating and recognizing your team members, which we may do. Or you can contact us and we can work with your organization to talk about that too.
One thing, Bobby, is like easy, everybody can do it, is just be more vulnerable, right?
Yep.
Stop guard, stop putting up, be truly vulnerable to rebuild that emotional fabric that's required to pull out these insights that these people need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
do you think some of that's been lost, Kevin, with the remote workforce and now kind of coming back to the office in a hybrid or full-time setting?
I think we strike up in that organic conversation. Organic conversation. I just happened to get a bagel out of the toaster and you came in to get your coffee. Hey, Bobby, how you doing? Right? It is that social connection, just like we're seeing social connection. Like I said, 16 cigarettes a day. We have this preconceived notion that a majority of our health is physical health. We've been trained to think that way. That's actually only 30% of our health.
Mm-hmm.
All other factors actually make us holistically healthy. And I think we're just learning more in this knowledge industry, like knowledge world that we're in right now.
Yeah.
All the time with Angelo, so much more about parenting and the health of children than we had even just 33 years ago.
Sure.
So we're in this knowledge age. It's not hoarding of knowledge anymore. It's sharing, and it's creating these internal networks, these neural networks that are connecting and saying, hey, we solved a similar, we did it like this. It's really turning kind of the pyramid upside down and creating more of connections across business units, Bobby. And that's really, a lot of businesses can solve their own problems themselves, but they spend a lot on consultants to help them figure it out.
Yeah, great points. Absolutely.
One thing I wanted to I don't know what time we got, because I know we all got a hard stop at 9. So we got about 8 minutes. Bobby, one of the things that I always talk about, and I think Chris was kind of saying, is I think it's a hard position for talent acquisition professionals right now, right? Especially if you don't know, or you don't really believe in what you're selling. And if you know you're selling a false bag of goods because you know what you need to say to get people, to sell people on that job, it can be a tough position. How do you help your team to continue to see, to your point, not when you build that relationship, because what you talk about is build a real relationship with that person. They say yes, then what? How do you make sure that you're continually rewarding the talent acquisition team to see their work, right? To see the final product, to see the impact that they're having? Because I think it can be a lonely place sometimes when it's, oh, we got them. Here's your onboarding. Good luck. We'll see you later. I'm turning on to the next one.
Yeah. Well, I think generally, I'll speak general about talent acquisition functions, as a whole. I think the really cool thing is that in talent acquisition, it's just as it is, right? You have the opportunity to provide a career and a life to somebody who might not have it, or a career growth opportunity to somebody who has been looking for that. So in and of itself, just the ability to know that you've touched an individual and perhaps change their personal or financial situation is, in my opinion, rewarding enough to continue to push forward in this field. Now, the other piece is that a lot of companies do a lot of candidate testimonials, right? They do a lot of candidate surveying and understanding, what how the candidate experience was. That information is so key, positive or negative, to share with your teams, in my opinion, because, that's what kind of helps them move forward. Kevin, you said it best, right? I have a bad day. 2 days later, I get a really good positive comment. I forget about that bad day, and I'm like, I just made an impact on somebody's life. So trying to weave those conversations in on a pretty regular basis, I think is key in talent acquisition. Like I said, we have the ability of taking somebody from outside of an organization and bringing them in. And that's just, the nature of the job. And I think that's what makes it special in and of itself. And then internally, you have the opportunity to impact somebody's life by helping them grow or develop in different positions. So
Do you think, right, knowing what you know about talent acquisition and then the other side as they kind of go into the life cycle of being an employee now of the organization, do you think it would be best to have a best employee experience or a candidate experience for you to follow them through like the first 30, 60, and 90 days following? Because you've really built and established a relationship. Their trust is probably more with you than even their manager at that point.
Yeah, Kevin, and yeah. In my past, I've gone even beyond that, those 90 days, right? Like, you follow the employee, you look at reporting that comes out, you see when that individual, takes on a new job or was promoted or got recognized for something, sending that individual a quick note, maybe doing quarterly, touch points with that person, right? I think those things go such a long way to just continue to build those relationships. And then there's also that kind of like that personal motivation, kind of like, hey, I made a really good hire. This person is now growing through the organization. And in a way, it's just, kind of right there standing in front of you, the fruits of your labor.
That's so cool. Yeah, I always encourage that because I think it's best for both parties, and it is their opportunity to continue to use sales terms, but sell between the sale. You're that opportunity to that employee for the first 90 days.
And I'd even go a bit further too, Kevin, like, it's not just maybe touching base with that employee, but I also think we know the first 90 days coming into an organization, it can be very, very stressful. You're learning new systems, you're meeting new people, there's, calendar invites flying all over the place, right? So, what I encourage also is sharing with those new employees, making sure, reminding them, hey, benefits are coming out on this date, or did you know about this particular, benefit that we offer? Have you thought about this event that we're doing, right? Like, those things sometimes, believe it or not, kind of get swept under the rug because new employees are just so busy. So, having those those purposeful communications with new employees, I think is helpful as well.
Love how you're just promoting like humanizing these roles more and more.
Exactly.
It is that it's just humanizing you. Yeah. Hey, it's your birthday, dude. Yeah, we built a relationship. Oh, I saw that promotion. Happy birthday and congratulations on your promotion. It's just, it's making time and space for it. I think.
I think that's the biggest thing. Then that's the biggest pushback you're going to get. As I think about it, we don't have time for that. But how much time does it really take just to reach out? Whether it's an email, whether it's Slack, whether it's a quick text, or whatever it might be, right? But it goes so far. It goes so far. So that's awesome. Great stuff, Bobby.
Yeah.
Well, this was great. I know we got all got something else to do at 9 o'clock this morning, but fascinating conversation as always. I always enjoy getting together with you guys and having these types of conversations to really talk about some of the shit that we're seeing right at the end of the day. This is stuff that we've clearly, visibly learned and are sharing back, and hopefully as insights that others can take and learn and grow. And if you need help, reach out. But I had a blast today. Great seeing you boys as always. Let's just hopefully this air clears up by the weekend so we can get out and golf or do anything outside.
Yeah. I got to say this too, Kevin. I'm surprised. I think we made it 48 minutes through before one of us swore. I think you were the first one there. So this is really, we're turning a new leaf over there.
I thought of it. I thought about doing it. I think I changed my mind at the last minute.
Yeah, I would say, it adds context.
That's right.